publishing do when one of the biggest non-fiction releases of the past 10 years turns out to maybe, allegedly, be a pack of lies? Let's talk about it. Hello friends, my name is Megan, if you're new here. If not, welcome back. Today I am here to talk about a controversy that has been shaking the publishing industry. And you know what? I'm going to investigate it. I'm going to investigate it and see what it says about the industry that we buy our beloved books from, and what it says about it, what it says about the morals of it, the integrity of it, the trustworthiness of it. It all begins with a book called The Salt Path by Raina Winn. It was published in 2018 and has since sold over 2 million copies. This is a huge book, particularly in the UK, one of the big releases of the last 10 years. Yes, I have a pointer. We're going to have things behind us. It's a hugely influential book, and it means a great deal to a lot of people, which is going to be important later. This book is important to people. Now, before we get into the controversy surrounding the book, we have to talk about the plot of the book. Plot? It's non-fiction. Or is it? Or is it? Yeah, we need to talk about what the book says, because the controversy is around the integrity of that, the truth of what this presents as reality. So I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour of the story. So meet Raina Winn, the author of the book, and her husband, Moth Winn. Yes, you heard that right. His name is Moth. Or is it? What we're going to do is a very quick distillation of plot, because it is a little bit complex, especially then when we get into the controversy. So the Salt Path, the book, opens up with Raina and Moth. I have so much, this is so fun. Have I done this before? If not, why not? I'm a witchy I'm a witchy detective. The Salt Path opens with Raina and Moth losing their forever home, a 17th century farmhouse in the Welsh countryside. This is where they raised their children, it's where they plan to live for the rest of their entire lives. They renovated it a lot, and the way that in the book they lose it. So in the book there is a man named Cooper, and he is definitely the villain of the book. He is the big bad.
Is it me? Am I the drama? I don't think I'm the drama. Maybe I am. Am I the villain? I don't think I'm the villain.
And they lose the home when a childhood friend of Moth's, Cooper, he persuaded them to invest in his business. The business then failed, and Cooper took the couple to court to repay the debts of the company. And as the couple did not have enough money, their house was repossessed to pay off the creditors. So in the Winn's version of the story, they lost their home basically out of the goodness of their own heart, out of generosity, out of caring for a friend, helping a friend out, at no fault of their own, which is important to remember later. At no fault of their own. Then, a few days after they learned the house would be repossessed, Moth receives a diagnosis of a debilitating illness. It is called corticobasal degeneration, or as we'll call it for the rest of the video, CBD. This is an illness that is caused by the gradual deterioration of brain cells, which eventually over time leads to problems with movement, speech, memory, and swallowing. Once diagnosed, most individuals sadly pass away within 5 to 8 years. It's very, very rare for anyone to live longer than that. And much before that, they end up needing round-the-clock care. They deteriorate so quickly that long before they die, they need around-the-clock care, can barely move by themselves. Moth received his diagnosis in 2013 and had been living with symptoms for about 6 years before that. Faced with this much adversity, they decide to pack up their bags, leave, well, they're homeless now. They pack up their bags, leave their children. I don't know where their children are. They have children at this point. I'm not entirely sure how old they were, but they leave them and they don't seem to have much contact with their children. And they go to walk something called the Salt Path, which is a coast. Actually, you wouldn't be able to see it on the wall, but I'll put a picture of the route, like along the southwest coast of England. It's 630 miles. It usually takes people like 6 to 8 weeks of walking every day to complete. This makes up the bulk of the book and is really about their spiritual and emotional journey whilst they're on this physical journey. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because it's nothing to do with what the controversy is about. It's not disputed that they did this walk. It's more about the other stuff surrounding it. But know that that is what the bulk of what the book is about. By the end of the book, they have really found themselves, found what's important to them. And also, interestingly, Moth's CBD symptoms have pretty much abated. They're much, much less intense, and his symptoms have become almost negligible, miraculously. Now, let's get into what has spawned the controversy, and that is the investigation. So, this is an investigation that was published by The Observer, a newspaper here in the UK, last week. We should introduce Roz Hemmings. Roz Hemmings knows the couple from their past, and one important thing that she needs to tell us first off is their names are not Raina Wynn and Mothwyn, but Sally and Tim Walker. Let's change the names. Change your costume, change it around. So, the real story begins not with Cooper's business failing, but with Sally. After I think she lost her part-time job at a hotel, she becomes a part-time bookseller for Roz's husband Martin's business. I said a lot of S's there. Roz's husband Martin's. I shouldn't have said husbands. Too many yeses. Husband Martin's business, a very small business. She is the bookkeeper. Time went on, years went on, she was working in this job, and Martin realised, hang on, where's my fucking money? Where's my money? I should have more money than I do right now. So Roz and her husband went through the books, and at first they found that it seemed that Sally had stolen about £9,000, had embezzled the funds. She'd been writing fake checks, squirreling money away, and had embezzled £9,000. They confronted Sally, who apologised, turned up at their doorstep crying, saying, I have the £9,000, I've sold my mother's wedding dress to pay for this, and they realised this was the only chance to get the money back, and so they accepted it. But then they kept looking at the books. They kept checking up on what Sally had been doing, and they found that over the years, the figure wasn't 9k that she had embezzled. It was £64,000. Where's that money gone, Sally? Where is that money gone?
Oh my God, I don't have any money. What happened to the money?
They obviously reported this to police. So like, first time, we let you pay it off without involving police. Second time, fool me once, fool me twice. Sally was arrested and taken in for questioning. The police questioned her for the day, but at the end of the day, they allowed her to return home and said, you gotta come back tomorrow. But in the words of Roz, the next morning, she never showed up. She had vanished. Let's travel from Wales to London now, following in the footsteps of Sally, who turns up on the doorstep of a couple that the Observer calls Rebecca and James. James is a distant relative of Tim. Now, the Observer interviewed Rebecca and said that Sally told them that she was on the run. I'm on the run from the police.
Just let me explain, will ya? Save it for the police, eh?
Because her employer had found out that she'd been taking their money and she was going to be prosecuted criminally. And James said, no relative of mine is going to jail. So James arranged a deal under which he would lend them the money to repay the debt of the money that she had stolen. Oh shit, I hadn't put the salt path up. They're walking the salt path. I'll put it over here next to Tim. Or should I put it up here? Back in Wales, Roz and Martin get contacted by a fancy London solicitor who tells them Sally would repay all the missing money and cover all legal costs as long as they did not pursue any criminal charges. They also had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. The Observer found documents filed with the land registry that shows that James, the loan that he gave them, he had secured it against their house as like collateral. And months later, when James's company goes bust, the money that they owe him is transferred to the creditors that he owes. And when it went to court, it was ruled that the Walkers now had to repay the debt, which now, because interest is at £150,000, they had to repay it within 1 year or they would lose their home. But you know what? Listen, Sally and Tim Walker, not only did they come up with dubious fake names, interesting choices, they could also come up with dubious schemes to make money. Well, some may call it dubious, some may call it ingenious. They set up a publishing company which only ever published one book. It was called, let me get this right, How Not to Dal Didi, which I think is like Sound Firm, by someone called Izzy Wynne Thomas. But not only did they publish a book and think, we can make some money from selling a book, from self-publishing, with it came a competition to win their home. If with every purchase of the book, you could win their home.
Well. Look at the competition.
There is none, bitch.
And it said in the terms and conditions, there's no mortgage and there's no other fees attached to the home, despite the fact that the mortgage is at like £200,000 and they've got the loan of £150,000 that they're trying to pay off. So that's not the truth. You're not telling the truth. It is not clear what happened with people thinking they were going to win this home. It doesn't seem like any reward for anything was ever given. And so that obviously didn't work, and their home was repossessed in 2013. So, as you recall, the Walkers' story is that they lost their home out of the goodness of their own heart. They were helping out Cooper and he betrayed them, which does have a ring to truth of it. You know, Cooper's business collapsed. James's business collapsed. The business of a long-lost relative, not a childhood friend. However, their story, like I said, is that they did it out of the kindness of their own heart, out of their own generosity, but that is not the truth. That is not the truth. Sally sold allegedly, stole £64,000, you know, embezzled £64,000 and was going to be taken to court for it. So it's like, we were such good people. We were helping. We got done over. Someone fucked us over. Yes, they were maybe unlucky that James's company fell through and he'd secured, not my wand, secured the loan against their house. But like, you put yourself in that position by embezzling £64,000, allegedly.
The rumors and nastiness about her? Well, we can do that. Do you know what? You want me to go there with her husband? I can go there.
She disputes many things, as we'll get onto a sec, but like, she maybe doesn't dispute that. I don't know. So for many people, as we'll get onto, who adore this book, this completely changes in many ways the emotional buy-in you get. In the book, you're like, these people have been put through it and put through it and put through it. We'll get into another way that they've been put through it, and like their lives are being ruined out of no form of what they've done. And you know, Roz said it ruined her husband's life. What she did, Roz says, completely destroyed her husband's faith in humanity. Another question that the Observer article raises is to do with Moth's diagnosis for CBD. We'll talk more about this when we just have a discussion about some of the elements that this controversy raises, but not only in this book, but in all three that Sally has gone on to publish, or Raina Wynn, under Raina Wynn. I wonder whether whether they pay Raina Wynn or Sally Walker Penguin. It's published by Penguin Random House, by the way. Michael Joseph, the imprint, if anyone was curious. In all three of the books, it follows a very similar pattern. At the start of the book, Tim's symptoms, his CBD symptoms are worsening. In one of them, he has a brain scan at the start that shows that his brain condition is worse than it's ever been. And then they go on a long walk, like the one in the salt path, and by the end of it, he is like semi-cured. Like his symptoms are gone. They have another brain scan and all the damage has gone, or like it's really repaired itself. It's a miraculous recovery. Everything's better. That is basically the plot of all three books. The Observer spoke to 9 neurologists specialising in CBD, and all of them were sceptical, especially about the length of time he's had it. Like I said, people usually die within 5 to 8 years. He was diagnosed in 2013, about how mild his symptoms seem to be, and about his apparent recovery, ability to recover from it. Usually people with CD, it's just like a marked decline, whereas he's seemingly having these flare-ups that then recover, which is not usually something you see with this illness. So that's basically the story. Well, there is more stories we'll get into later, but I want to have a discussion about elements that this raises. Let's start with publishing. Let's start with the publishing industry. Does publishing have a responsibility to fact check? And should we as readers trust the non-fiction that we're reading? So this will have gone off, in the words of Richard Osman, gone off like a bomb in the world of publishing. This will have been, for anyone who works in publishing, big news. This has been a huge success story. This is the kind of book, selling 2 million copies, this book will have paid for so many other books. Like in terms of what Penguin made from this book, it will have allowed them to buy and purchase so many other less successful books. This has paid for so much. This is like a huge book. I would really recommend listening. I'll link it down below. I'll link a few things down below. I'll link the original Observer article, and I'll link I can't speak. I'll link this podcast I'll tell you about, as well as a few other articles, which we'll get into a bit. I would really recommend Richard Osman's podcast, The Rest is Entertainment. They covered this, and it was really him speaking from his perspective in the publishing industry. And he says, when this book comes in, you would buy it as a publishing house because its story is so unique, so emotional that you would buy it. You wouldn't think it would be the huge success that it is. He said you'd maybe pay a 30k advance for it, give a bit of marketing budget to it. I saw some people on Twitter saying like, I like seeing the downfall of this book because it reminds me of how some books are preordained to be successful in publishing because they're given all the marketing budget. I didn't get the sense from Richard Osman that was maybe what happened with this. He didn't seem to think that. But that is a whole nother issue and a whole nother topic, that like what publishing puts on its A-list for marketing will be successful. Silver Elite, I haven't even discussed that book, but Silver Elite by Danny Francis, we don't know who that is, has basically been successful because publishing pushed it and pushed it and pushed it. It was freaking everywhere for a couple weeks, you know? But anyways, in the editing procedure, you would think that the publisher would require some form of evidence for what this book is claiming, for Cooper's business, for like the steps of the story that they said led up to them going on the salt path that seemingly is untrue. Now, Penguin, after this controversy, after the news came out, they did issue a quote that says they undertook all the necessary pre-publication due diligence and that prior to the Observer's inquiry, we had not received any concerns about the book's content. But did you, Penguin? Did you do all necessary due diligence? Did you? Did you? The way that contracts work in publishing, Sally Walker or Raina Wynn would have signed a contract saying, everything in this book is true. Everything I say with non-fiction, everything I say in this book is true. The onus is on her. It is not on the publishing house. They would be like, great. She says it's all true, guys. She says it's true. Let's just trust her, you know? There's also a really great article that I read also in The Observer by Amelia Fairney, who was very high up on the ladder in Penguin for like 25 years. And she was saying that this should be a surprise to nobody. After all, Stephen Bartlett, remember that guy? Well, no, remember, he's everywhere. He's freaking everywhere. This isn't about him, but it could be. You know, he's been proven by the BBC to constantly platform health misinformation on his podcast. He's been given his own imprint at Penguin. His own imprint. Not his own book, his own imprint. Sit with it. So does publishing give a shit about facts? Do they give a shit? Do they care? Or do they just care about what sells? Are we being fed bullshit in all the non-fiction that we read?
I shouldn't get this angry.
There are many reasons as to why there may be a lack of fact-checking when it comes to a book. And a lot of it has to do with the structure of publishing, how like the book process is set up. Firstly, the main aim is to have a compelling book. And the editor might tell the author to like amp up the tragedy, or like delve into the shit parts, particularly at the start. Like it's going from that tragedy to that success, that, you know, the low to the high, that is compelling for us as the reader. And also, non-fiction as a genre has been very much evolving and changing. You know, you used to have science-y books and biographies and stuff, but like people seem to no longer be able to read anything that isn't a narrative, and so now we have narrative non-fiction. This combines facts with descriptive storytelling and sometimes maybe taking a bit of artistic license. Like, for example, I'd say The Five by Hallie Rubenhold. My gal, I trust her, but should I? Who knows anymore? That is narrative non-fiction. Like, she's telling you the lives of Jack the Ripper's victims, but like she's really embellishing them and telling you their story. And there were points in that I was like, how do you know that, Hallie? How do you know that for sure? You know, that is kind of bringing the facts of their life to life for us in a non-fiction book. You know, you've always got to give the people what they want, in the words of the Wizard of Oz. This is what the readers want, and so publishing is giving it to them. Also, publishing is under, you know, pressure, and editors are under pressure to publish more and more books every single year. So corners may be cut. An anonymous source told Amelia, fact-checking is one of those things that a lot of editors see as a nice thing to have, but let's cut it from the schedule if we don't have time. Another thing that I also thought was super interesting from her article, Amelia says, over the course of my career, I sat through hundreds of publishers' acquisition meetings where the commercial potential of each project was forensically analysed. I can only remember a handful of times when fact-checking was mooted, and then only in the context of avoiding legal challenges. So they don't give a shit whether we're reading something that's true or not, you know? I felt a little bit like this, and this may be a controversial opinion, it's been a very successful book, but I was reading, what on God's green earth is it called? The Kids on Bad Being on the Internet is Bad book. What is it? I don't know. I'll put the cover in here. I read it this year. The Anxious Generation. Where in that book, I'm sure everything he was saying was correct. It's basically about how like we're also anxious now because of the internet, and children should never be on the internet. They shouldn't be allowed access to the internet, and everything that's wrong with us as society is because of the internet. And I'm sure a lot of what he was saying was correct, but sometimes I felt like he was twisting the truth a little bit. He was twisting the truth. I felt like he was twisting facts to support his narrative when those facts could equally be used in a different way, and was refusing to look beyond anything that was his synopsis, or his thesis, I should say. Interestingly, I didn't put this in the script, but Raina Wynn did give an interview once where she was like, we twisted the story. I'll put maybe the quote on screen. We twisted the story, and she meant it as in like we twisted our story, like we made ourselves a new path to go faced with adversity. But did you twist the story? And maybe at this point she believes it, you know? Well, she does actually. We'll get into that in a second. Interestingly enough, I haven't put anything on the screen for this, but this has recently become a film. A film! Apparently movies with millions and millions. I mean, a book is a book, you know. A publisher's investing 30k into it, whatever, you know. This is chump change. Millions have gone into the film. It's got Gillian Anderson and Jason Isaacs starring in it. And do we not fact check before we make a million pound film? Do we not check our facts? Apparently not. Apparently we don't. Gillian Anderson said that she was asked, what was it like when you met Raina Wynn? She was very guarded. You don't say. You don't say. Point 2 that I want to discuss are the ethics of writing about chronic illness. Moth's diagnosis is a core part of the book. And I don't want to speculate about whether someone is lying about having a chronic illness or not. I think my point basically is the same. When you write a book about chronic illness that is essentially cured through alternative medicine, you have a huge responsibility. That is not something to be taken lightly. When I was doing research for this, there are tales upon tales upon tales of either people who themselves have CBD or people whose loved ones had CBD, and they read this book and it gave them hope for a moment, for a fleeting second. It gave them hope, like maybe I can recover, and they try and they go on walks but they keep deteriorating, and they think, why am I not like that? Why am I not recovering? I think it is cruel to those people that at the very least, when we'll get into, he has an extremely atypical, perhaps never been seen before case of CBD. And the whole book is centered around this. The whole series is centered around his diagnosis and what it means to live with CBD. But if your version of CBD is so atypical, I think you at least should say that in the book. Because, you know, vast majority of the population maybe has no idea what CBD is, which we'll get into in a second. It has wider ramifications. But if someone who does have it reads it, or someone whose loved one, whose husband or wife dies from it and thinks, why couldn't I save them? Why couldn't I help them recover? Maybe they never could. It gives them false hope, and I think that's so cruel. You know, people whose husbands died years ago and like have lived with this guilt that they couldn't save them after this controversy are like, it makes me feel better because I was living with guilt every single day that I couldn't do for my husband what Raina, Sally did for Moth, Tim. I also think it affects wider societal issues about people living with disabilities. There was a great YouTube video I watched, I can't remember the creator's name, but I will link it down below again, that focused entirely on this topic. So if you want to delve into it in more detail, I would recommend go checking out the video. But essentially, as the creator said in that video, and I definitely agree with, it makes people think that people with disabilities aren't just trying hard enough to get rid of them, or chronic illnesses. Like, just try harder, just try to be better, and be better. Just go for a walk. Get up, get out, you know what I mean? I think especially in the UK, we've always had like a attitude of like disability benefit scroungers, or like young people. There's a big thing at the moment about young people not wanting to get into work and like claiming disability. And it just creates a society that I think is lacking compassion for people living with chronic illness, because they think, why can't you all be like him? He's completely fine, you know, he's miraculous, he's changed his life because he went for a long walk. That's what you need to do. Now, Raina did issue a response to all of the Observer's claims, which I will link down below. It's like about 2,300 words something. She went into detail with a lot of things. The first one being the claim that Moth perhaps does not have CBD. And in that, firstly she claims she has never sought to offer medical advice and never suggests that walking may be some kind of miracle cure for CBD. She was just charting Tim's personal journey with his own illness and what helped him and, you know, what they found worked for them. But the Observer then has also responded to her response, which I will again leave down below. I didn't want to get too deep into the he said, she said of it all, you know, the back and forth, but these are very interesting if you want to read more, because like she has a response to everything they said and then they have a response to everything she said. There's a lot that we could talk about here. But they pointed out that in her most recent book, Landlines, Wynne writes, after 200 miles of walking over endless headlands, carrying everything we needed to survive on our backs, Moth's health began to improve in ways that should have been impossible. His gait became almost normal, his thoughts cleared, his short-term memory sharpened, and movements that had been almost impossible before became easy. Where is the not claiming that walking is a cure for CBD? Is that in the room with us? Because I see claiming walking is a cure right in front of me. Yeah. I think this is pretty dangerous. I think it's pretty dangerous, and like I said, I think it's pretty heartbreaking for people with the illness. Either way, he at the least has a very atypical version of this. She actually, in her response, included 2 letters from doctors about his diagnosis of CBD. So he has seen doctors about this. But I think the letters she chose, these are letters she chose, I think they're interesting. One letter says, although the stability of his clinical syndrome today, by comparison to my previous meeting with him some years ago, tends to make me think that this is an even more unusual disorder, perhaps monogenetic. None of the letters that were put in were like his initial diagnosis, they were all later doctors' meetings. And if that doctor is saying, even I think maybe this ain't CBD, I think it's maybe something else. I would argue he's almost definitely suffering from some form of illness. It seems to me, and I could be wrong, CBD is first kind of diagnosed with stating and presenting symptoms, and perhaps he was misdiagnosed. And then that could have become a big part of their lives, and maybe they don't want to see, because I think to publish a letter as proof, saying, he has CBD, everyone look, and then the letter saying, maybe he doesn't, you know, maybe, I'm not sure this is that. Reads to me as maybe someone who, that is their truth, that is so their story, that is so what they believe in, that they are unwilling to view alternatives. All the doctor's letters say, this is extremely, extremely, extremely atypical. His ability to live this long, kind of have peaks and troughs, is extremely atypical. He may have something we don't know what the name is yet. Although there are reasons that people may doubt, you know, how much they believe in it, because their ex-landlord, they were allowed to live at this farm for very, very cheap after the publishing of the book. Someone read it and loved it and said, you can come live in my farm, or like farmhouse. The landlord claims that Moth told him he had months to live in 2021. And then Landlines came out and the brain scan was wonderful and the landlord was like, what the fuck? And apparently they moved out very quickly after. So I don't know what to think, but at the very least, profiting off an extremely miraculous recovery to an extremely atypical version of a disease, and perhaps conveying harmful messaging for other people with CBD, makes me uncomfortable, you know? And I think we need to have more of a discussion about how chronic illnesses, disabilities are presented in nonfiction in this kind of like wellness, healing genre of books, because I think they can have really far-reaching ramifications. Lastly, this is a small point, but is it our fault? No.
I pray to God you're guilty. You're innocent.
Narrative nonfiction has become popular because that's what we want to read, you know? Life does not have a satisfying arc, right? And we as readers want a satisfying arc. So we buy nonfiction, narrative nonfiction about people's lives that has a satisfying arc. And thus we kind of like encourage the beast of the formation of the book as it is. I don't know. I also think people have a bit of a parasocial relationship with this book, which I think is interesting. And, you know, the exposure of this will have far-reaching ramifications. People moved to Cornwall. People changed their entire lives because they were inspired by this book. They said, I'm moving to Cornwall. I love this book so much, I'm moving to Cornwall. It's like me saying, I love the Medical so much, I'm moving to a retirement village. Like, it's like, And they're going on the walks and they're, you know, they're meeting apparently people on these walks who don't know that it's them and are saying, I love this book and whatever. You know, this book has meant so much to so many people. The messaging, the ability to recover, the ability to pick yourself back up from life beating you down at no fault of your own was a big appeal to many, many people, and many people will be upset now. Where are we now? As I mentioned, Raina/Sally, her website is called Raina Wynn, published a response in which she addresses a lot of the claims I put forward. I'd encourage you to go check that out down below. You know, a distillation of them. Wynn's her maiden name and she prefers to use it, and Moth is a shortening of his name Timothy. So instead of being Tim, he wants to be Moth. Like I said, she disputes a lot of the claims about Tim's health. Interestingly, the embezzlement, I don't think she denies. She says, I made a lot of mistakes, babes. I'm a woman who made a lot of mistakes. And yeah, I don't think she really denies the embezzlement, which really, I think, changes the whole shape of the book. And again, picking yourself up when life has dealt you a poor hand of cards. She seemingly, allegedly, dealt herself a poor hand of cards. You know, also in the response, things like the house prize, she said everyone was refunded, but again, there's no proof of that. And again, like I said, the Observer has issued a response to her response. I don't know how many responses to responses we're gonna go down, but maybe this will keep happening. Her fourth book, On Winter Hill, has been delayed by the publisher, Michael Joseph. They said the decision had been taken in light of recent events, in particular intrusive conjecture into Moth's health, which it said had caused considerable distress to the author and her family. They also said, it is our priority to support the author at this time. So that's very interesting. Penguin are saying they're standing behind her. They're not throwing her under the bus. They're like, you bitches are spreading rumors about Moth's health, about the embezzlement or whatever. We're supporting the author at this time. So it was originally meant to be published in October. It's now supposedly sometime next year. I'll be interested to see whether that comes out. Booksellers have been reporting people have been cancelling their pre-orders of the new book, getting refunds, have been asking for like recommendations for other Great Walk titles. You know, people are wanting to read something else to kind of replace the hole that this is leaving. More people have been coming out of the woodwork claiming that she owes them money, although in the response she says that she's paid everyone that she knows of. Apparently they had a lot of people to pay off for different things, which I think is interesting. And like, if anyone I haven't paid, please contact me, is what she says. People whose Moth story gave hope and kind of inspired are speaking out about rethinking. It's really, I would really recommend reading some of the articles. They have quite a long section about people who, again, either have CBD themselves or have loved ones, and just how finding out that there's questions about him having the illness, or at the very least he has an extremely atypical version of the illness, you know, it's really making them rethink everything. PSPA, the only UK charity dedicated to people with CBD, have cut ties with the couple. They had previously worked together very closely, and yeah, I don't know if there'll be more responses from either side, more research from the Observer. They seem to think that they back up everything that they can say. Again, Raina says it's all bollocks and cruel and intrusive and trying to put a lie in everything in her life. I just thought this was interesting, and I thought it raised a lot of questions for the publishing industry, and I don't feel like it's really crossed the pond in terms of a discussion. It's been big here in the UK, but I don't think many people in the US know about it, so I thought I would share. I'd love to know your thoughts on this situation at all. Again, I will link things down below, like the original Observer article, Raina's response, the Observer response, Richard Osman's podcast, for further reading. But, you know, my opinion is I think she allegedly probably embezzled the money, because she doesn't seem to deny it, which I do think changed the whole shape of the book and what it means and what it's saying, and the where you're starting the book from. In terms of Moth, you know, there are doctor's notes that she has provided, which you would argue someone shouldn't have to share medical information. I don't know whether he has CBD or not, but I know he has a very atypical version of it, and like I said, I think it opens up conversation about the way we talk about chronic illnesses, and it's dangerous to present what is maybe one miraculous medical, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for, recovery, as something that's possible for all people, because it's probably, sadly, not. So anyways, I thought this was super interesting. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Like I said, let me know any thoughts you have on all of this down below, and I will see you very soon in another video. Bye!